The world remembers Adolf Hitler as one of the most notorious dictators in human history. His rise to power, his quest for domination, and the devastation of World War II are etched into our collective memory. But what if I told you that Hitler's ultimate downfall was not simply due to military defeats or the might of Allied forces, but due to one single critical mistake? A mistake so grave that it set off a chain of events leading directly to his demise. This is the story of the mistake that killed Hitler. Before we dive into Hitler's fatal error, let's quickly recap how he rose to power. Born in 1889 in Austria, Adolf Hitler began as a struggling artist, failing to gain acceptance into art school. Frustrated with his lack of success, he found a new path in politics. By 1920, he had joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, better known as the Nazi Party, a group driven by intense nationalist and anti-Semitic ideologies. Hitler's powerful oratory skills helped him rise to leadership within the party. In 1933, he was appointed Chancellor of Germany, and through manipulation, intimidation, and force, he transformed the Weimar Republic into a totalitarian dictatorship, declaring himself Führer by 1934. Promising to restore Germany's former glory, he blamed the nation's troubles on the Treaty of Versailles, communists, and most notably, the Jewish population. His plans for expansion led to the invasion of Poland in 1939, triggering World War II. In the early years, Hitler seemed unstoppable, conquering much of Europe through swift and brutal blitzkrieg campaigns. Germany's military victories mounted rapidly, giving Hitler and his regime an air of invincibility. However, as the war dragged on, his hubris grew unchecked, leading to increasingly reckless decisions. This overconfidence would ultimately prove to be a dangerous and fatal flaw. By 1941, Hitler had turned his sights on the Soviet Union, launching Operation Barbarossa. The Eastern Front quickly became one of the bloodiest theaters of World War II. Hitler's decision to invade the USSR was ambitious, aiming to crush communism and secure vital resources. However, it was deeply flawed, stretching the Wehrmacht to its limits and forcing the Germans into a brutal two-front war that severely weakened their overall military capabilities. Despite early victories, the German army was woefully ill-prepared for the brutal Russian winters. They faced fierce resistance from the resilient Red Army, and as temperatures plummeted, the Wehrmacht became bogged down in the unforgiving landscape. Supplies ran low, and soldiers lacked proper winter gear. Yet Hitler, in his stubbornness, refused to retreat, insisting on holding ground. This decision proved catastrophic, with tens of thousands of German troops freezing or starving to death. The Battle of Stalingrad was a critical turning point in World War II. The city, bearing the name of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, held immense symbolic importance for both Hitler and Stalin. It represented more than just a strategic military objective. It was a matter of national pride. Hitler believed that capturing Stalingrad would demoralize the Soviet Union and crush their spirit. However, he gravely underestimated Soviet resilience and the brutal, unforgiving conditions of urban warfare, leading to a devastating defeat. The Soviets, under the command of General Zhukov, launched a massive and well-coordinated counteroffensive during the brutal winter of 1942. The German Sixth Army, led by General Paulus, was soon encircled and trapped within the city of Stalingrad, cut off from reinforcements and supplies. Despite the dire situation, Hitler stubbornly ordered them to fight to the death, forbidding any retreat. By early 1943, however, the Germans were left with no choice but to surrender. Stalingrad marked Hitler's first major defeat, signaling the beginning of the collapse of the Third Reich. The mistake that ultimately sealed Hitler's fate came in 1944, a year after the tide of war had already turned against him. By this point, the Allies, now significantly stronger thanks to the combined efforts of the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union, were coordinating to deliver a final blow to the Axis powers. Hitler was aware that an Allied invasion of Western Europe was imminent, but he remained unsure of the exact location or timing. This uncertainty would lead to strategic blunders that hastened the downfall of Nazi Germany. Hitler's military advisors repeatedly warned him that an Allied invasion of France was imminent. Some believed that the Allies would land at Normandy, a less fortified but strategically significant section of the French coast. Others thought the invasion would take place at Calais, the closest point between Britain and France. Despite conflicting opinions, Hitler was certain that Calais would be the primary target. He consequently stationed his strongest panzer divisions, including elite SS units, in the Calais region, leaving Normandy more vulnerable to the eventual assault. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched Operation Overlord, D-Day. The invasion took place at Normandy, catching the Germans off guard. Despite fierce resistance from the German forces stationed there, the Allies began pushing inland. Hitler's generals immediately requested that the panzer division stationed at Calais be sent to counter the invasion. This is where Hitler made the mistake that would cost him the war and ultimately his life. He refused to release the panzer divisions. Believing that the Normandy invasion was a diversion, he remained convinced that the real attack would come at Calais. For hours, the elite German tanks sat idle, far from the action. By the time Hitler finally realized that Normandy was the main invasion, it was too late. The Allies had established a strong foothold, and the German defenses were crumbling. The delay in deploying the panzer divisions was catastrophic. It allowed the Allies to gain momentum, pushing the Germans further back. Soon, Paris was liberated, and the Allies were on a relentless march toward Germany. By early 1945, Germany was surrounded. The Soviets were closing in on Berlin from the east, while the Allies advanced from the west. Hitler's once powerful Reich was in tatters. His top generals had either been captured or killed, and his most trusted officers had lost faith in his leadership. Even as defeat loomed, Hitler refused to surrender. Hitler spent his final days in a bunker beneath Berlin, cut off from reality. The man who once dreamed of a 1,000-year Reich now saw his empire crumbling before his eyes. By April 1945, with Soviet troops just blocks away from his bunker, Hitler made the decision to take his own life. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide alongside his wife, Eva Braun. The man who had plunged the world into the most devastating conflict in human history was now gone. But in the end, it wasn't just the Allies or the Soviets that killed Hitler, it was his own fatal mistake. The mistake that killed Hitler was not just a strategic error, it was a symbol of his arrogance, his inability to adapt, and his blind belief in his own infallibility. The delay at Normandy may have been the decisive moment, but it was part of a pattern of poor decisions and underestimations that ultimately led to his downfall. In the years since Hitler's death, the world has reflected on the atrocities committed under his regime. The Holocaust, the devastation of entire nations, and the millions of lives lost are all a grim reminder of the dangers of unchecked power. Hitler's downfall, while inevitable, was hastened by a single critical mistake. A mistake that changed the course of history. The story of Adolf Hitler is a cautionary tale, one that shows us the consequences of hubris, tyranny, and the terrible cost of war. While the world will never forget the horrors of his reign, we can take solace in the fact that, in the end, Hitler's own miscalculations led to his ultimate defeat. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more historical content. And remember, history's greatest lessons are often learned from the mistakes of the past.